Welcome to Inside the Castle, the podcast that goes behind castle doors to have real conversations with real people about solving the nation's toughest challenges.
I'm one of your hosts today, Marie Kopka.
And I'm Aaron Schneider.
Welcome back to our People First series, where we celebrate unity, empowerment, and the Corps' greatest asset, our people. Aaron, I'm super excited for this time of the year.
Yeah, I think it's a great time of the year with the holidays coming up and spending time with friends and family. You know, it's really just something that's perfect and exciting each year.
Yeah, and totally. I'm all about the holidays, all about spending time with family, but I'm also very excited because we're like this much closer to be able to use our Portland District dog and cat calendars.
I've been looking so forward to this calendar, and every year when it comes out, I tell all my friends and family, I'm like, look at this, look what the Corps does, and they all get really excited about it. My son, in fact, has actually already requested that you do a tortoise calendar, so if you want to throw that on your list of things to do, we would really appreciate that.
That's great, a tortoise calendar. Well, we'll see what can be come up with a tortoise calendar. So our guests today are actually the ones behind these standout products, and we have with us Chris Gaylord and Carrie Solon with the Public Affairs Office at the Portland District. So thank you both for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having us.
All right, so thanks. Before we dive in and talk about cats and dogs and infrastructure, could you just tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you found yourself with PAO and Portland District?
Well, I started. I worked for public affairs when I served in the Air Force. And then when I got out, there was an opening at Norfolk District. So it was a great segue for my public affairs career in the Air Force, bringing it to the Army. Worked for Norfolk for about 9 years, and now I've been at Portland District for about 6. I think that's everything.
Yeah, I right out of high school, I joined the Army, was an Army photojournalist, public affairs specialist, spent 7 years doing that, got out, worked in the private sector for a little bit, doing employee communications, then decided to use that good old GI Bill, got my degree in communication theory, and was applying for jobs at like the worst time of the year, but they had an opening at our local Corps of Engineers district, and truth told, I never wanted to go back to working for DoD or government or anything, and I only admit that because now 5.5 years later I feel very differently about it. But I interviewed, the team was great. Our chief was actually interviewing the same week I did, interestingly enough. But yeah, came on board, and a few months later took the social media program over, and yeah, stuck around because it's been a really good time.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I guess to our listeners, we did spoil it a little bit by mentioning the cat and dog calendars already, but that's definitely something that sticks out when you kind of go through the social media posts from your office. So could you tell us a little bit more about what your office's approach is to communication? I mean, how did you all decide to use humor as one of your key components to your communication strategy?
I think it was just a little time spent managing social media and seeing how incredibly difficult it is. I mean, really, our kind of foray into humor started with social media, and I was also managing our internal communications at the same time, and it just was feeling so stale. Like it was just kind of boring announcements on our rotators on our homepage, on the intranet and everything, and I don't know. I just asked our chief, Alan, one day, like, can I use a meme to talk about? And I think it was like we got these new water bottle filling stations in our building, and I was like, can I use a meme to advertise that? And he's like, yeah, sure, go for it. So I put together an example, and some people emailed me and thought, yeah, we love it. That's pretty funny. Keep it coming. And that was just kind of like, we never really looked back. We just, from then on, because Carrie and I at one point were co-managing our internal communications, and we were just cranking out meme after meme. Everything became memes after that. So many people started telling us quickly within, weeks or months that they were never reading any of our internal stuff before, and now they're actually paying attention. And so that was kind of like the qualitative, like, this is working, let's keep on this path. And actually, it's funny because on this day, almost exactly this day, 5 years ago, is when we did like our first Unhinged social media post, which, if you recall, was an Elf on a Shelf parody, Yams on Dams. And it just kind of came out of nowhere because our district was never like that on social media. And I put up that post like mid-December, and it just took off. We'd never seen a post ever take off like that before. And again, it was like, it's working. That just became the point at which we never turned back, and it just became our tone, voice, and our strategy.
And
Yeah.
I'll just add to that our office setting has really kind of contributed to that. First of all, Chris is one of the funniest people I've ever met, and he just really kind of creates this atmosphere that when we're brainstorming, he'll say some unhinged stuff, but man, it really gets the creative juices flowing. And that we've applied that to our internal communication programs. We've applied that approach to our media relations, our pitches. You've seen it on social media, and it's been really great to work with somebody like Chris, his default thinking is very creative. So it's really kind of paved the way for us to do many of these things.
I could say all the same things about Carrie. And actually, one thing that's been really integral to us, like having some success, with humor and creative content, is having, because she kind of alluded to it a little bit, these just regular sort of brainstorming sessions. We literally would just take our laptops down to a coffee place or something down the street and just sit there and just bounce ideas off one another. And that's kind of how it started 5 years ago. And we try to do that, at least every other week. And it started with our social media, but now we kick around ideas for media pitches and news releases and videos on YouTube and all kinds of things. And really, the central idea, to get at another aspect of your question, I don't think that either of us really spoke to yet, is it's all about being the gateway to a message. We can talk about whatever we want on social media, but we're seeing thousands of posts and ads and pieces of content every single day. And we have to find a way to break through all that. And, we're already in a space on social media where people are going mostly for entertainment anyway. So it's kind of that way to get our foot in the door with some serious messaging, but in a fun way that resonates with people.
Yeah, I'm thinking back, my career and the messaging of projects, infrastructure isn't necessarily that glamorous and exciting, especially maintenance and ongoing infrastructure. So to get people's attention, it's really impressive that you're able to do it. And it's obvious that, you're yanking a few cats on there and, blow them up a little bit, and that gets the attention. But it's also like looking at the calendar, the message that you have in each of those are creative in themselves, but they also talk about the actual role and importance of the infrastructure. So I think you're very successful in bringing that humor in, but then conveying that real message. And I know you're hitting the right audiences, because I have people that, are friends and family reaching out to me when this calendar comes out, and they're like, did you see this? So these are people that, they know about the Corps of Engineers. They know I work there, but I don't think they know what the Corps does. So I think you're doing a great job on that. I was kind of curious, like, how did you come up with, I think your first product, as you said, was Yams on Dams, but how did you come up with the cats concept?
Yeah, good question. So I don't know how well y'all know Northwestern Division's PAO team, but Eileen Williamson, everybody knows Eileen, right? She's probably going to be listening to this, so I'll just go ahead and say it. But Eileen, shortly after we started to get really silly on social media and I got to know Eileen, she started kicking me ideas and thoughts and stuff on, Facebook Messenger, like, hey, check this out. Hey, maybe you should draw inspiration from this. And one thing that she shared with me that I really loved was like somebody had done this post of just cats lounging on really famous architecture. Yeah, it was just famous places from all over the world. And it was in black and white. It was really well done. And she suggested, like, we should do, cats on dams or something. It's like, oh yeah, I like that idea. And so we just kind of went our separate ways, and we're like, hey, we'll make our images, you make yours, and we'll like cross promote. So we did that for National Cat Day in 2021. And for both of us, those posts were really, both of our accounts, those posts really took off. And then when I was planning out, because I'm not the most organized social media manager, but what I do is about a month in advance, I'll put together tentative content plans because I like to have flexibility. And I was looking at October and late September, and I was like, what could we do for, National Cat Day again? Because I don't know if Eileen cared about it anymore, but I was still like, that was good enough. We got to do something again. The idea to make it into a calendar came to me because it was like the end of the year. So I was like, why not just repurpose those same images and those captions that I already have and just put them into a calendar? And a graphic designer at the time put it together in like 48 hours. Loved it. It was great. We put it out to the world. Never really thought it would be that, we thought it would be popular, but the way that it took off at the beginning of 2023 was incredible. So yeah, it just grew from that idea that Eileen shared with me, and then it evolved trying to do something to kind of keep up with it.
I'm curious because I hear both of you talk about and use this word of like unhinged. And so it's not like typically a word that you hear in, I would say, like government speak or government communications very often. So how are you balancing this being unhinged with just typical government communication? Like, how do you know when like you're pushing it to a certain extent, but then there's this line, right, that you don't want to cross? So like, what is your formula for that? Or do you just go for it? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I don't want to talk too much. I'm already talking too much. I need to like mute myself for the rest of the...
Yeah, that's always the line. I think we have a pretty good sense of it. I think between maybe Chris and I, we have more than 40 years of experience probably in public affairs. Also have a background in journalism, worked for some newspapers, but I think we have a pretty good sense of what's starting to push the envelope a little. And when we are starting to feel like, does this feel iffy? We check in with each other, and I think we have a pretty good radar. I mean, I think a couple of times in internal communications, we've had, some people just who didn't like our style, and we had some complaints. A couple of times, just some pop culture references just did not go over that well with some of the audience who didn't understand the pop culture references. So we kind of like had to step some things back a few times. But most of all, I'd say, like, given the success rate of everything that we've put out, like our margin of maybe taking it up to the edge and maybe going a little bit over is just, I think it's fractional, I would say. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I caught your use of the word formula, Marie, and there's so many things in a STEM field like ours and a STEM agency like ours that are formulaic, but this is one of those things that is not at all formulaic. It's more of an art. That sounds like a cliche to say, but like, I mean, a lot of it has to be the right personality. And Carrie gave me these great kudos, but like, she's at the very least just as good as I am at being funny and coming up with really clever ideas. And there is no like be all end all way to say, here's kind of the formula for a funny social media post that doesn't push the boundaries too much. It's just, I think that there's probably a lot of people out there who may think that we're just kind of haphazardly throwing things up, don't really care. But there is so much thought that goes into it. And I think that's a really big piece of, especially if anybody's out there is listening and wants to take their social media in a bit sillier direction, absolutely go for it. But, being mindful and really sitting there and trying to think 10 steps ahead of the post itself. How can this be misinterpreted? And here's another thing too. Someone's always going to misinterpret it. Like if you want to start doing this, it's a risk reward, right? Like you're taking a risk, somebody's going to get mad, and it's just, it is what it is. But us taking the time to kind of, really find our left and right limits and bounce things off each other when we're feeling a bit of doubt has kept us out of a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I was thinking about that and wondering how you kind of deal with the popularity, but then also like that probably negative feedback that comes with it. I'm sure like people are very passionate about their pets and cats and dogs, and to all extremes, and I'm sure you got positive and negative feedback. And how did you deal with some of that when it was coming in, both the popularity side, which I don't think the core deals with very often, but then the negative side too, which is probably more traditional for us.
Are you referring specifically to the cat calendar?
Yeah, like just people's comments, the feedback, general feedback you got from the public, because getting public input is always a little scary, I'd say.
Well, you might remember one of our most popular tweets in the history of our Twitter was basically turning negative feedback into our solution. So today's show covered the calendar at the beginning of 2020, and it just skyrocketed from there. It was amazing. Like, we were giving interviews about it like on a weekly basis for probably 2 months, 2.5 months. And somewhere early on, within the first week of that Today Show, like, we were on the homepage of Today. It was amazing. Somewhere along the way, within a few days or a week or so, I was noticing that there was kind of a trend, and I was maybe like 7 to 10 people on Reddit or on Twitter or on Facebook or somewhere that were like kind of knocking the Photoshop skills. It was never intended to be like a masterclass on Photoshop, right? But it was just so funny. Like, in my head, like, we give this free downloadable calendar to the world to talk about what we do in a fun way, like that, that is transactional, but also respects our audience's attention, doesn't take it for granted. And then people are still not happy. And sometimes I'm not mad about that. I just think it's really funny, like, you could put every little bell and whistle on something that you want. Somebody's always going to find like the negative in it. Sometimes it's hilarious to me. And so I screen grabbed all of the comments of that I could find. I kind of put them together in a collage, and I was just made a meme tweet out of it. Like, us makes a free cat calendar for the world to enjoy. People, you suck at Photoshop. And CNET actually wrote a whole article based on that tweet. It was positive and endearing, but they sort of more or less agreed with it being pretty bad Photoshop. But they said that was what gave it its charm. So yeah, I mean, that's just one example, but like, it really depends on where the feedback comes from, because we do get a lot of we've had a ton of negative feedback and uphill battles internally. The public it's been almost 100% positive over the years, in response to what we've done. There are people even in our own community of practice, though, who just don't agree with it. And so I try to turn those into opportunities to just have a conversation. Like, hey, we're a STEM-based organization. We follow the data. Here's what the data says, and like, this is working. Here's why it's working. Here's the thought behind it. Not everybody's going to agree with that. But I've also seen some people who were pretty passionately against what we were doing, who have changed the way they feel about it over the years. And those are some of the biggest wins to me. And I'm going to keep those close to my heart forever.
I'll add to what Chris is saying. We had one of our coworkers, and I think he put it really well by saying humor is kind of the Trojan horse. Like, you kind of break into this space with the Trojan horse, then you release the information. Because I think a lot of people take for granted that just because we're a government entity and we're speaking, that people are going to pay attention. But we're on an entertainment platform where most people enjoy cat videos over an explanation why we're changing our DSAC rating at a dam. So we got to use the cat to talk about the DSAC rating. I think people are starting to come around to understand, like, on an entertainment platform, we can't take people's attention for granted.
That analogy, or that the visual of the Trojan horse, and using that as a way to get your message, to get in and then get the message out. I think that's great. So we've talked a lot about the cat calendars and the dog calendar, because I'm a dog person, so I first went to the dog calendar. But anyway, so we've talked about the calendars and a little bit about the history, but I'm kind of wondering what your favorite kind of campaign or product that you've put together has been like over the years. Do you have something else you want to draw attention to share with our listeners?
Go for it, Carrie.
Okay, I'll say in the last year in our media relations program, because I worked for the Dallas Morning News for a while, I think I kind of understand how newsrooms work pretty well. So excuse me, I want to change our pitches a little to make them more intriguing, kind of take more of the approach that Chris was doing. So last year we were dredging at the mouth of the Columbia River, and that's where the Pacific Ocean meets the Columbia River. And it's called the graveyard of the Pacific because it is just the most dangerous water, huge waves. It's just powerful, mighty, just a graveyard of shipwrecks. So what we did with our pitch was like this subject line is we're heading to the most dangerous water in the world. Want to come for a ride? And so then we unpacked from there, like, this is what you can expect. You can maybe see the cooks struggling to make dinner on board as we're, going back and forth. And it was a really successful pitch. We had 3 different media outlets join us on our vessel, and we went out to sea and came back, and I thought it was great. And we've kind of used that throughout other media pitches. But again, it's just kind of this more playful, more human approach. We can't take for granted that, again, that just because we're talking, people are going to pay attention. We're trying to look for that hook. And I think what really helps us sometimes is we sit in the dark in the office. And because there are studies that show that you're more creative in the dark. And also there was this other study done that said they put adults around a table and they asked them to solve a problem. And they solved it in an adult way. And then they asked a different set of adults to solve kind of the same problem, but imagine that they're kindergartners. And so their solutions were more imaginative, more playful, more creative. And that's really kind of the space we create in our office. But getting back to what I was saying about campaigns, Chris, you had some good things.
Yeah, there's been so many pieces of content. It's kind of hard to pick out one or two. But I think one thing that I'm really proud of in more recent months is kind of the success that we've had on Instagram. I don't think definitely across USACE, not a lot of districts or entities are putting a whole lot of time and energy into Instagram. But last spring, I really just started to lean into Reels, which if you're not super familiar with Reels, they're kind of the way that you grow your audience, because most of your account reach with a Reel is going to be like 70 to 95% people who don't follow you. And we've grown over the past like 18 months from, I think, about a little over 1,000 followers to we actually just passed headquarters number, so we're almost 18,000 right now. Sorry, not to cause beef, but one of the I wouldn't call it a campaign as much as just a new strategy to lean into Reels as a tool. And one of the things that I've tried to do is really incorporate our folks into our videos. Like, I started off putting myself into Reels because I'm comfortable in front of a camera, but really within the last like 10 months, I've tried to get our engineers out of their comfort zones and to be in really goofy videos with us, and our park rangers and our fish biologists. All kinds of people have agreed to do it. One of our most recent successes is the video with our GIS folks that really took off. Yeah, I think it's just that kind of strategy of, it's a new way of showing people that we're fun and personable agency by putting like the faces of the people who do the really important work on a daily basis out there for the world to see. And it's one of the downstream effects of that is I've just had such great bonding moments with some of the people who have worked in the same building as me for 5.5 years. I've never even got to know. And we're just making silly videos together, and it's been really incredible. But it's also been so well received by the public. So that's what I'm going with.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask you, because I know like somebody has a good idea, but it takes a lot of people to make these big ideas happen. And I was going to ask you about how does the district support you? Where do you get these pictures from? And then one of my colleagues sent me a picture of a bunch of Corps of Engineers employees pretending to be a hydropower turbine. And so I got to watch them all spin around, and I was thinking like, that's really funny, and it was really fun to watch. So clearly you're getting help from the districts, but how do you come up with the pictures, the overlays, these concepts, and how do you get these staff to be willing to pretend to be a turbine on camera that they know will go to at least 18,000 individuals.
I want to say that was Carrie's idea. That one particular, right off the bat, I just want to give her the credit for tossing that idea out, and then add to that it kind of comes back to sort of the like team culture that we've kind of cultivated. It was me and Carrie doing goofy stuff and having little brainstorming sessions at first, and then it's just kind of grown to where that's, everybody on our team is kind of there. That's where their head's going. It's just kind of the way we operate now as a shop. And we do have our regular content brainstormings where we'll sit around a table, or we'll go into a coffee shop or something and just bounce ideas off one another. And we typically try to start with like, who's got a need? And so Carrie might be like, yeah, I've got to pitch, let's say water safety. It's July. We want to pitch water safety. What are some good ways that we can do that? Well, okay, well, there's this funny meme that's going around, or there's this trend that's going around that we can kind of relate to and do something also with social media, so it kind of complements it. We get a lot of really good ideas generated from team members, and Carrie had mentioned that, and I sat there for a second. I was like, that's brilliant. That's really funny. And to speak to getting people to participate, I mean, you just have to ask. There was in 2020, right in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a guy who did I don't know if y'all remember it's pretty dated now, but the Dos Equis most interesting man meme. So there was this guy, he's like a kind of senior mechanical engineer with our district, and I don't even remember why I asked him to do this. He just went above and beyond and set up a whole photo shoot, got himself in a suit with this cool background, and recreated that meme. And I've used it for like 10 different things over the years. And right away, he went in my pocket, and I was like, Todd's the guy. And it started with Todd, and then I was like, Todd, who are other people like you? Can you send this to your team? And it just branches out from there. You start to get to know people. I met a guy named Dan Jensen, super funny. He and I were just talking on Teams about, like, if I have a funny idea, but I don't know the engineering way to like make it related to, what we do, I'll ask him. It's just kind of getting to know your folks, right? And having, establishing relationships with them, and getting to know who's comfortable with being silly and letting their hair down. And you get to find those folks pretty quickly, and then you can burn those folks out pretty fast. But, it's just asking, well, who else do you know who might be interested in this? And it just, in little tiny leaps and bounds, like people start to come around, and you get to know I keep a list. I actually keep a running list in a Microsoft OneNote of people who are like on board for this stuff, and I'll just go back to those people. It's a list of probably like 50 people now, but they're like my go-tos.
That's so great that you're able to find so many like creative people all throughout, JS folks, different engineers. I mean, who else in the building? I mean, I don't know. It's limitless if you're open to it.
The funny thing is, some of them are not that way at all, and it sometimes actually works out in your favor, because like the GIS folks, that's a great example. Because I was just filming that reel like 4 weeks ago, and I told them on Teams. I had never met any of them before this. It's like, here's what I want to do. Okay, sure. They seem kind of like a little bit timid about it, but I go down there, and within like 15 minutes, I'm asking one of the guys, like, can you dance with this globe? Because that's that's in the reel. He's dancing with a globe, and it's set to the song Maps by Yeah Yeah Yeah. It's talking about how much we love maps. And he just looked at me, and he's like, you want me to dance with it? And I was like, yeah, sort of like, like a ball, sort of a intimate ballroom dance. So that's the feel we're going for. And he kind of looks at his teammates, and so it isn't just finding like the creative extroverted people. Sometimes it's finding sometimes the best performances come from the really introverted people, and you can see how I can never express my gratitude enough for those people who very uncomfortably step outside their comfort zones, and it's just brilliant, and it comes across as so funny on camera, and people can tell that maybe they weren't super comfortable with it, but it just works.
I love that reel. I would never have guessed that there was any hesitation in dancing with the globe. I thought like that was just like a normal tango partner. That's great. That's great.
I mean, it might be.
At least in the future now. So for those of our listeners that are also just other districts and public affairs offices who might be thinking about kind of going this route, this more creative approach, do you have any advice for those folks, or can you also like share any lesson learned that might help other public affairs office kind of think about how to tackle kind of changing things up?
I'll say, especially sometimes with some of the districts we've heard, and especially that Chris has worked with, is just getting leadership buy-in with this kind of approach. And for me, it's I'm going to use like an Army term and saying adapting to the battle space. Like, you're on social media, you can't just bring your dry press release and post the text up there and expect to get traction there. So I think leadership buy-in and like reminding them you're the trusted communication professional. We've worked in this sphere for years and years. We know what we're doing. I think buy-in and trust. And sometimes you have to build that with your leadership, and you might have to wade in a little bit slowly because, like, as we were saying through the years, we've had some times where we've kind of pushed the envelope, and I would say you don't want to do that so quickly. So yeah, and I'd say Chris is always open to taking calls. I'm always open to taking calls. Yeah, Chris, what do you got?
No, internal buy-in is like the biggest thing. It's also the hardest thing, though, I think. And, we had some really great support in the form of, Alan, our chief. And not everybody's going to love this answer, but keeping in mind all the things that Carrie just said about like being the communication professional and the trusted expert, we just kind of went for it. And it was a sort of ask for forgiveness later type of thing. By the time that probably 2 or 3 months had gone by, and by the time folks had really caught on and were forming a lot of strong opinions about what we were doing, we were also like in our local media being recognized for it, and our division commanding general was out like coining us for it. And so the success caught on quickly enough that it kind of combated some of that, I guess, criticism. But yeah, I mean, it's like Carrie said, don't take your audience for granted. We do a lot of really important work that's very special and that benefits the American public in a lot of different ways. But I said this in a really bad way when I did my first interview about the cat calendar. I said engineering is not that exciting. And it was hilarious. Our former deputy commander is super cool, but she Teams chats me and she's like, engineering's not very exciting, really? Yeah, I hand slapped a little bit for that one, so I figured out a better way to say it. Engineering is exciting. It's just not one of those things that's going to grip the average person in the social media space. They're there for different reasons, and pretty much for every platform, like 60% or more of folks are going there primarily for entertainment purposes. If we're too dry and we're too straightforward, it's just going to fall in with all the white noise. It's social media, and remember that it should be social.
That sounds like it was kind of a catastrophic interview then, and I'm glad you got your feet under you. But what else could we expect from you guys? I mean, you're so creative. We've got these 2 calendars. Do you have anything else on the horizon that you can reveal to us today?
Why don't you start, Carrie, while I sit here and think?
We're just we have a challenge down in the Willamette Valley where we're having to draw down reservoirs to historic levels. And there's been myriad effects from that with water quality and unexpected fish die off. And we're trying to navigate that communication environment. So next year, we're talking about a campaign to kind of inform people more about our role down there, because they get it in bits and pieces, but they only get it when they're upset. And we're having to respond to something. So we're going to take more of a proactive approach. We're going to try and do something fun with it. So that still has to be worked out, but I'm kind of excited about taking a creative approach, a more fun approach to really helping this communication challenge in the Willamette Valley for us.
And just to tease that a little bit, I'm not sure if it's going to come to fruition or not, but I did volunteer to put on like a mermaid suit and be flying out of one of our reservoirs to play the role of a salmon who has just returned to spawn. So I don't know if it's going to see the light of day, but I've agreed to it.
I think we all hope that it does.
I hope it does too, honestly. But I mean, that's a lot of this, believe it or not, is just us flying by the seat of our pants. And, if you had asked us this at the end of 2021, looking ahead to 2022, I never would have told you I was going to make a cat calendar. But I mean, maybe that's an important point especially for other public affairs practitioners to take away, is that, I think a lot of people want to plan, strategy, comp plan. Oh my goodness. But sometimes the best things take you by surprise. Whether it's like a trend that you see, and I know we're not allowed to be on TikTok, but if you personally are spending time on TikTok just to get a feel for what's out there and what might be showing up on Instagram in a couple of weeks, for example, sometimes it's we have if you all know Matt Raby, he's the public affairs director for Northwestern Division. He once said to us that a public affairs professional has to have time to think. We try to spend a lot of time on a regular basis thinking. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. Maybe I need to spend more time thinking.
Well, it's probably good advice for all of us, though. Spend time thinking, self-care. I know that's one of the other campaigns that I really enjoy from your office, is kind of the self-care moments. We could talk all day about this, I'm sure, but we are getting toward time now. So I just wanted to ask one final question here. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave with our listeners? Is there anything else that you wanted to share about your work or what your office is doing?
I'd just again like to extend the invite for anybody to reach out with us, reach out to us, and we can brainstorm together, give you ideas, maybe help you get some good footing so that you can start taking the kind of approach that we have, and do it in a way that will resonate with your audience, because different parts of the states will have like different tones, and we love to work with people. We always get great ideas working with other districts as well. Yeah, so please keep us in mind as you start trying to be creative. We'd love to help.
I'm gonna get all confrontational here. No, I'm just kidding. I have heard this a lot of, oh man, more times than I could possibly count. I'm going to try to speak to a lot of things in about a couple minutes here, but people have said, especially across our community of practice, it works because it's Portland, right? Because Portland's silly, keep Portland weird, all of that. It works because it works. And when I've been asked to present a lot on social media, and one of my slides now that I adopted this year is just a map of the United States and all these different accounts that you can follow on Twitter or TikTok or Facebook, wherever, that are doing it really well across different industries and fields, inside government, outside government. This strategy works because it works. But I think more than anything, like, while humor is what has worked for us, set a goal for 2025 to just do something different, right? Maybe it's not humor. Try to make a creative video or something. Find a way to grab your audience's attention. Because it's the payoff that we've seen is it's unbelievable. And we're sitting here talking to you now. It's all about long-term public perception, really. And I know there's still people who don't agree with what we do. I challenge you to, dive into some of our comment sections and read a little bit of what folks are saying.
Well, thank you, Carrie and Chris, for sharing, most importantly, the cat and dog calendars with us, but also your stories and telling us more about the Portland District Public Affairs approach to communication. We appreciate you and your insights. To our listeners, we want to hear from you. What topics are important to you and who you're interested in hearing from. Until next time, be safe, be innovative, and
be responsibly unhinged.
Responsibly unhinged.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. This is really fun, and keep up the awesome work. So I'm definitely looking forward to your next calendar releases, and hopefully you can incorporate a few other animals along the way.
Thanks for joining us for this Inside the Castle podcast. To provide your feedback, email us at cw.infrastructure.team@usace.army.mil. Stay tuned for additional Inside the Castle podcasts as we explore life inside the Corps and revolutionize civil works together.